Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're excited to be presenting PM tools for managing unapplied deposits and multiple encounters. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator with Attentive. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded, and that we'll send out a copy of the slides along with the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with Attentive, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in NextGen healthcare, and we're good at getting data into, out of, around, and through NextGen. Basically, our goal in life is to make delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their NextGen software investment. We're passionate about providing solutions for our healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything NextGen. Next, I wanted to mention an upcoming educational webinar on regulatory changes that you need to know for 2021 and beyond. This is going to be next week on Wednesday, and in this educational webinar, we'll examine key points of every upcoming need-to-know regulatory change, including how it will affect your practice, and if you need to install a patch or upgrade to NextGen to remain compliant. The major changes we'll cover include appropriate use criteria, 2021 E&M coding changes, CURES CMS information blocking, e-prescribing updates, patient portal changes, and ONC certification. If you haven't already registered for that, head over to the Events and Education page on our website to register for it now. Okay, so back to the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you may type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So while we get started here, I wanted to launch a quick survey just to see what area you guys are most interested in, because we are going to be covering a few different solutions today. And so I just want to make sure that we are able to cover all of those for you guys so that we can spend extra time focusing on the stuff that you guys care about. That's why you're here after all. So if you take a look at your screen, you'll see a pop-up. If you could take a minute and just check whatever you think is most applicable to your practice and problems that you have that need solving, we would be happy to cover those more in detail. So we're going to leave this up for just a minute here. Looks like people are starting to vote. Looks like more votes are still coming in, but wow, looks like so far everybody is currently interested in resolving a backlog of unapplied credits. So Tom, make sure that you focus on that a minute here.
Okay.
And we're going to leave the survey up for just a few more seconds here. And we're going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to close that. And you can see here that we got everybody's interested in resolving a backlog of credits. A number of people are interested in processing copay of dollars, and then some equal interest in all the other things as well. So Tom, with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the webinar over to you so you can go ahead and start covering these topics. So Tom, it's all yours. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Appreciate it. So my name is Tom Seco, and I'm the Business Development Manager with Attentive. And with us is Joel Scholes, and Joe is our Vice President of Product Solutions. So as Chelsea mentioned, thank you for taking the time today to go over our webinar and talk more about how you can efficiently manage your co-pays and deposits and unapplied balances and more efficiently enter in multiple encounters for a single patient visit. This is just a brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. The format of today's webinar is I'm going to take you through a couple slides in the beginning to give you an overview of each product and how it helps increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the billing staff. And then I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to take you through a demonstration of each of the products. Each product demonstration takes about 15 minutes. And then I'll come back on and give you an overview of who Attentive is. And as Chelsea mentioned, then we'll answer any questions that you have at the end. So when we're done, you should be you should have learned something more about our add-on products to practice management to help you more effectively manage your copay dollars, more effectively manage the money taken in advance of services, more effectively manage the money in your unapplied buckets, and more effectively be more effective at entering in multiple encounters for a single patient visit. So to start with the Unapplied Deposit Manager software, really the purpose of the software is to make the job easier and increase productivity. As all of our add-on products that we've developed over the years, the focus has really been on just that, making everyone's job a little bit easier and increasing productivity. With the Unapplied Deposit Manager, let the software do the work for you. The product has been developed from about 10 years of us working with NextGen practices and health centers who have asked us over that period of time to write scripts and small programs for them to address the unapplied balances on patient accounts. And what we've learned in those 10 years is that the amount of unapplied balances grows in terms of the number of instances and the overall dollar amount for various reasons from organization to organization. The copays add to that unapplied balance because the front desk takes a co-payment from the patient when they check in, but there hasn't been an encounter created yet. And so the payment gets posted to the unapplied bucket and then should be moved and applied at a later time. In some cases, this does not happen. And when that happens, it ends up lingering out there and the amounts tend to grow over a period of time. There are organizations that take deposit money, and with those deposit monies, they are taking that money and it gets put into the unapplied bucket. So because of these situations, like I said, we've been asked to write programs and scripts to address that, and those solutions that we've created in the past are handled in many different ways from organization to organization. So what we did is taken all that information, put it into this new program, and allows you to pick and choose what rules on how you want to handle addressing the unapplied balances. And you'll see how this works when Joe takes you through the demonstration. It does work at the encounter level and it does work at the account level, and allows you also to put the line items into a credit state so that they can be refunded at a later date as well. So that's a little bit about the Unapplied tool. The multiple encounter billing manager software that you're going to see as well. Again, as I mentioned, makes the job easier and increases productivity. There are some practices that require multiple charges for a single patient visit, and this requires the billing people to have to enter in these charges on multiple screens while they're doing the work. So what we did is we created one screen that allows you to enter in those multiple charges for the single patient visit from a single screen rather than have to toggle between 2 or 3 different screens to get the work done. So it does significantly reduce the time that it takes to do the work, and you'll see in the demonstration how this is done. So with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Joe, and Joe is going to take you through the demonstration of Broke products. And then, as I mentioned, when Joe gets done, I'll come back on and we'll talk a little bit more about iTentive and who we are, and then answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to switch screens here for a second. You should see NextGen Practice Management. If not, let us know in the chat window. Again, as Chelsea mentioned, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to go ahead and just type them into the question box as we go along, and then we'll have a period after showing the tools to answer those questions for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Both these tools have components that load in as NextGen add-ons. They coexist with your NextGen. They work real time in your NextGen database. They operate on your behalf just like NextGen would operate. We're going to start with the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. That was one that people clicked a lot on the survey there that we took at the beginning of this. And we'll talk about how it's going to help you with just general unapplieds, with copays, and also with managing deposits, money taken ahead of time, right, for one or more future services. So the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, the heavy lifting for it happens overnight. There's a job that gets scheduled either in your database or through the BBP. It's a stored procedure that does all the heavy lifting each night, and then you come in the next morning and there's a set of batches for you to review and approve and, you know, prune out anything you don't want and go ahead and post. What that job does each night is controlled by this screen that we're looking at here. So the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, really, this particular screen, only a couple people in your practice would need access to that, and then they pick the rules that they want, save them, and then each night it'll go ahead and create those batches. Now, if you decide you don't want it to run nightly, you want it to run weekly, that's fine too. It's just how often you schedule that particular job to run. So let's take a minute and look at the various things that these rules can do for you and what can be implemented. This may be a little overwhelming at first. Again, as part of the install, we'll work with you in your test environment to go ahead and pick the rules that solve the scenarios that you want to handle. And it may be a multi-phased approach, right? We may clean up your general unapplieds for a while. We may clean up your copays for a while. We may clean up your deposits on an ongoing basis. So if you think about unapplieds in NextGen, you have your encounter unapplieds, which exist on a particular encounter and usually are intended for use on that encounter, but any remaining amount may be moved up to the account level so that they could be used on future or other encounters. So in the upper left here, we have this box with the general rules for the encounter unapplied processing. So we're going to start out looking at within the encounter, do we have, any patient amounts due that are an exact match of the unapplied amount? This is your basic rule. NextGen PM has some processing in there to do this rule. But we kind of build on top of that by saying, not only can you process when it's equal, but you can process if the unapplied amount is greater than the patient amount, right? If you have $30 in there, but only $25 is due, what do you want to do with that? Well, we'll go ahead and apply it. And do we want to over apply it and end up with a $5 credit? In some cases you might, especially if you want to refund that money out instead of moving it up to the account money. Or you can say, you know what, go ahead and just apply it up to the patient amount. So we'll still have $5 sitting in unapplied that you could either use on that encounter in the future, or through rules down here at the bottom, go ahead and move it up to the account level when you're done. Okay, so we have that ability for when the unapplied amount is greater than, do you want to credit it or just use it up to the patient amount? If it's less than, again, you may want to use that and still go ahead and apply it toward the patient amount to reduce that. We have these two rules here where the unapplied equals some specific amounts. Do you want to apply up to the patient amount or apply with a credit? And these specific amounts where clients have used these in the past is handling copays. So if you know your copay amounts, we can go ahead and click on these and input those amounts. And after the first time we do that, it'll go ahead and save those, and we can put in multiple lines and put in various amounts. So if it hits a unapplied equal to one of these amounts, and again, in our hypothetical example here, you're doing a copay cleanup, then it'll go ahead and force that onto the line item, okay? Because that was, money the patient paid, particularly for the copay, and we're going to move it onto the line item. In the case I chose here, we're going to go ahead and move it onto the line item, even if it gives the patient a credit, because if they have a credit now on the line item, that may be money that you want to refund back either manually or using Refund Manager. All right, so these top items here are good for general unapplieds, and then the lower items are good for the copay cleanups. And then these last three here really have to do with, if there's money left on the encounter, what do you want to do? The simple case is this middle one here, which is move it to the account. Just, if there's no longer anything to do on this encounter, I have money sitting in Unapplied still, go ahead and move it up to the account, and then we can use it elsewhere on the account in the future. So that's definitely an option. You may decide, you know what, we want someone to manually review it. So you can say, let's go ahead and create a task. So you pick your favorite task type and it'll go to the default user or group assigned to that task. Now, when you're doing these encounter unapplieds, I'll get to this one in a little bit. When you're doing these encounter unapplieds, you also have some options to set the scope of the work that it's going to do. Do you only want to look at specific SIMs or modalities? And you could enter in a number of SIMs, or if you have them grouped by modalities, you can enter in the modalities and pick those. Are you just testing this right now or doing some limited runs? Maybe you want to just limit it to certain providers or locations. When you're moving around the patient balances, maybe you want to wait until the insurances have settled out. So we have a checkbox here to say, you know what, don't move around those unapplieds just yet. Ignore this until the insurances are settled out in zero and all the money's been moved into the patient bucket. And then, you might want to skip specific SIMs. You might want to ignore encounters that have specific transaction codes on them. Again, you can go ahead and pick these and pick your transaction code. So if you're taking money in on an encounter, let's say for some kind of deposit that you just want to hold on to for a while, you can say, you know what, don't process that here with our general unapplied cleanups. And again, as testing, you can set the range for start, stop, and counter date ranges to look at. We have some clients who said, you know what, we just want to automate unapplieds up to a certain amount. So you can go ahead and set that range in here. And you can say, you know what, if it's outside that range, go ahead and task it. And then you can pick your task type and enter in text for a subject line and have that happen. So a lot of different options here for how you're scoping these encounter unapplieds when you're doing your cleanup. Now, we talked a little bit about the general unapplied issue, which is you have money sitting out there, you just generically want to get it applied. We talked a little bit about the copay cleanup, where you know your copay amounts and you just want to go through and get those ones forced down onto the line items too. And then we haven't really talked in depth about deposits yet. So I want to kind of, as we go into the account unapplied side of the house, kind of set the stage for the deposits, because that is somewhere where the deposits play a big role. Now, the deposits are really tagged by a transaction code used to post them into Unapplied and various SIMs or modalities that they can be applied against. So it's a cross-reference really of those things. So I have a scenario set up here in kind of for fertility realm with that cross-referencing. So we create a set, we give it a name, and then we set up our rules. And again, these rules are really, at the end of the day, a mapping of a particular transaction code to SIMs or modalities that money will be applied against automatically in the future. So if I look at number one here for fertility treatment, we pick the transaction code, we free texted a name. Over here for the application of that money, we can create multiple lines. In this case, there are two with that name, and we can specify SIMs and modalities to go ahead and apply it against. So what happens now is, instead of the staff having to watch for where you want to use these unapplieds, the system will automatically do that. It'll see you took in $600 for two treatments of $300. So it'll see it was under fertility here. As the system runs each night, it'll go, can I use that 600? Can I use that 600? And then finally, one of the nights, either a modality is hit by the SIM or a particular unique SIM code is hit. And it goes, oh, okay, I can go ahead and use that. How much is left? I have 600, let's take 300 off it. And then the next time the other $300 happens against that same SIM or modality, it would be used too. So this deposit management becomes this cross-reference that you build out for your specialty of that mapping of a transaction code used to tag the deposit when it comes in, and the sim or modality of sims used to apply the deposit in the future. So you go ahead and build this, and then what happens is these checkboxes here that end with the tagging. So if we're moving something up to the account level from an encounter, if it matches one of the criteria set up in that cross-reference, we're going to kind of earmark that for that future use. So this is just going to move it up. It's not going to apply it. Now, traditionally, if you're taking a deposit into Unapplied for future use, you're normally going to post that hopefully straight into the account Unapplied, in which case we can look in the account Unapplieds too to see if there's anything that needs to be tagged, again, using that deposit transaction code. Okay, and when we have money that's tagged and available, we can say go ahead and apply against the encounter using the rules that we set up in the cross-reference. And that was that cross-reference that I just told you. So the deposit functionality is going to happen for you automatically. You don't need your staff continually watching for these new charges and moving the money around. The system can do it automatically for you overnight on those deposits. Now, if you're using it for the deposit functionality, you can say, okay, you know, if I've done something on the encounters or the account for deposits, maybe I don't want to use the remaining general rules for the account Unapplieds. And the general rules really are things like, you know, apply it to the first matching patient amount, or if we have money sitting in Unapplied, you know, find the oldest encounter with a open line item and just, you know, apply it going forward to the newest. Okay, then if there's money left, we can say, you know, any remaining amount, well, you have the option to do nothing and leave it in the account Unapplied, or you can say, you know what, find the newest matching encounter with a credit. We'll just keep building it up on there within the account. If there is no matching encounter with a credit, then normally you'd say, yeah, go ahead and put it on the newest encounter. And then we'll just kind of build that credit there. And that's in the cases where you don't want to leave money in Unapplied. You want to go ahead and just get it moved down to various line items so that you can process it. Similar to the other side, to the encounter side, you have the ability to create tasks here too. So again, you click that, you pick your task type, set your subject message, and it'll go ahead and create a task in the NextGen work log with that and assign to the default user group. All right, so left side of the house, left side of the screen here handles your encounter Unapplieds, right side handles your account Unapplieds. Similar to the encounter scope, we have an account scope. Again, useful for testing, but also useful for if you have a lot of them sitting out there, you don't want to pile them all into a single batch because you'll never be able to review them all. So, you know, just do a certain number of accounts per night, or just sort it by letters of the alphabet, the starting letters of the last name. Maybe you just want to do, you know, A through, you know, B, or BE is the starting letters, those kinds of things. And similarly, there's dollar amounts here that if anything's outside the dollar amount, don't process it using this automatically. Go ahead and, you know, still do those ones manually. And similar to the other side, there's the ability to say, you know what, don't do the unapplied processing until all the encounters have a zero balance. We'll work with you on your particular scenarios as part of the install process. Again, normally we're going to set this up in your favorite non-production environment, usually test, but it could be train or demo or, you know, whatever other one you have out there that's got recently refreshed data in it. And then we'll go ahead and execute this. Now, in a normal processing, as I mentioned at the beginning, the job's going to run overnight. It's going to do all the heavy lifting while no one's on the system. You'll come in the next morning, and you'll have your batches set up, and the description on them will be what are defined here in the tool. And then you'd go ahead and edit those batches, prune them, then balance them, and go ahead and post them. Now, when you're running it interactively, you have the ability to do short runs of data without having to wait for overnight. And in this case, I can go ahead and click the run checkbox. And what it'll do is for up to 5 minutes of processing, it'll go out there and create the transactions and batches interactively. And the 5-minute limit is just so you don't tie up the database during working hours if someone accidentally hits the wrong button. So after 5 minutes, if it runs too long, it'll go ahead and kill it. So now what we have down here in the grid is the transactions that were created to move money around in NextGen. So we found the credit sitting out there, and we found an encounter and a sim to apply it against. And we can see, the ones that are encounter based and then the ones that are account based. So the whole point is, again, it's an 80-20 rule. We're going to try and get the majority of your unapplieds handled, and then really your team just needs to handle all the exceptions instead of doing the full scope of unapplieds that are sitting out there in your system. And then if you're testing this and you run it and you don't like the results and you want to adjust the rules and run it again, it's certainly as easy as coming back here in the NextGen, looking at your batches, seeing what was created. Again, it creates standard NextGen batches, so you can go ahead and open them, walk through them, delete anything you don't want. And then if you're keeping them, you'd post them. But in this case, we could go ahead and say, you know what, I didn't like that test run. And we can go ahead and remove these batches from the system and go ahead and take another stab at it. So this tool is really, it's a new tool, but it's the culmination of a dozen years of writing individual unapplied scripts to clean up different scenarios in NextGen. All the rules that you see up above and the scope conditions that you see in the middle are all things that we used to do as custom work for clients that now we've created this tool that you can create your own rules and set the parameters for them, the constraints for them, and go ahead and run them yourselves. And like I said, it may be a several phased approach where you do it one way for a little while to get a particular issue cleaned up. Then, you might move on to your copays, or you might move on to deposit management, so on and so forth. But what we're trying to do, ultimately is just have fewer people with hands on the keyboards having to manage unapplieds in your practice. So that's the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. About a third of you expressed interest in the Multiple Encounter Billing Manager. And this tool, as was mentioned in the slides, is really about being able to create several encounters from a single, with charges, by the way, from a single screen for a single patient event. If you think of, in this case, this one's set up for ophthalmology, you might have a professional fee, a surgery charge, facility fee, anesthesia charge, maybe some specialty equipment that you charge for, all on separate encounters. So as part of the configuration, we'll work with you to set up these different kind of categories of charges that'll be on different encounters. And they can be on encounters in the same practice or in different practices, right? You may have the professional charge in your clinic. You may have the facility fee in your surgery. You may have someone else in another practice that bills anesthesia charges. So this gets configured. You're allowed to create right now up to 7 encounters per single patient visit. Most of the clients we've seen do like 2 to 4 additional encounters. When you're creating those encounters, you designate one as the base encounter. This would be the encounter that gets created at check-in. And as part of that, in your auto flow, you're going to go through and you're going to have a rendering provider or referring provider. You're going to have insurance on it. So when you create the other encounters, you can say, you know what, just use the insurance from the base encounter so I don't have to go pick that again. You can set the minimum and maximum number of those encounters. So if you're just ever going to have one, you'd go through, set these as 1. The only reason you'd leave them as 0 is if they're optional, right? Maybe in this case, we're not going to have the A-scan machine on every one, but we will have a facility fee and anesthesia. So you could set that so you have to have at least one of these other encounters before it'll let you save it. You can also set up what to do with the rendering and referring from the base encounter onto the other encounters. So if we look at the surgery center here, we're going to still make you pick the rendering because maybe it's a different surgeon, but the check-in, the base encounters rendering becomes the referring in this case. All right, so all different options that are available to be set up. And then again, you may want to match the dates because these encounters may be created several days later, but you want the service date to still be the date of the base encounter. So there's a checkbox to go ahead and enforce that too. So we work with you for your particular situation to set up these additional encounters and the parameters for them that would get created. Now, what does this look like when you're using it? Well, if you know the encounter that you're going to add these other encounters to, if you know that base encounter number, you can go ahead and type it right in. There is a tool to do an encounter search where you can go ahead and input in the patient's name and go ahead and find a list of encounters and pick that. But if you know that encounter, we'll go ahead and bring it up. So this is the encounter that was created at check-in. It has a particular charge on it already. We can add charges to this if we want, or we can go ahead and just start creating our new encounters. So we could come over here to our surgery center and say, you know what, add new encounter, surgery center. And really what we're doing here is we're taking the relevant fields that you see on all the different forms you have to pop between in NextGen and presenting them on the single grid so that you don't have to jump around. In fact, if you look at these, you'll see up here, we're in one practice with an encounter, and then this other one for the surgery center is going to be created in our other practice in the database. We don't have a rendering provider yet, so we can go ahead and pick one. So the searches are built in here. We can go ahead and either right mouse or use the hotkeys and add a new charge. So we can go ahead and pull that back, and similar to NextGen with your sims, any modifiers that you have will come back here too. So we see the headers up here. The one that's highlighted is the one that you're on. So if we go over one, it's the sequence, the quantity. If we want to override the pricing, the current pricing, the modifiers that were pulled in, it was smart enough to pull the diagnosis code down from the base encounter. So again, what we're doing is we're pulling those things forward. Now, all this work is just happening in memory right now. So if you decide you don't like this, you don't have to save it. You can start over, you can remove things. We'll see in the pending column that these are both ready for insert, both into NextGen and into the set of data for this visit. This one up here, because it exists in NextGen, is only going to be enrolled into the set of data for this multiple encounter visit. It'll also handle anesthesia calculations, so we can go down here and we can say, let's go create a new anesthesia. We can go ahead and pick our provider. We can do our charge. I believe I have an anesthesia sim set up in here. And then we can, just like in the anesthesia screen in NextGen, we can go ahead and enter in our start and stop time, and it'll go ahead and calculate units and pull the base unit, and it'll pay attention to the various rounding rules you've picked by the payer. So now we have all this set up here on the screen. Normally we'd have to bounce, into NextGen, change practices, go look up the patient again, go look up, find the encounter, add the charges, all that stuff. We've been able to do that from a single screen. So when we hit save, it'll go ahead and double check all this to make sure I have the required information, and then it'll create those encounters in NextGen and move us on to where we can go ahead and enter in the next one. Now, if we want to see what that looks like in NextGen, I can go ahead and pull up this set of encounters, and I can go look at my surgery center here. It created encounter number 31. So we can go into NextGen, change over to our surgery center, and take a look at that real quick just to show you what's been created. By the way, if the person is not a patient in the other practice and you are doing it cross practice, it'll go ahead and change them from a globe to a chart. It'll create the patient record for them. So here's our encounter that got created. Here's our charge that got created. all your information that's in here and pulled over from, one practice to the other when we set up the patient from one to the other. So all that happens from a single screen. Okay, this one, I think it may just be patient pay. Yeah, so or actually it is Blue Cross Blue Shield. So it went ahead and set up the insurance for us too. So the whole key here is to increase productivity by giving you a single screen to create encounters, add charges to those encounters, and just click a button and make it all happen for you in NextGen. This screen is really intended for creating new items. Any maintenance you do in the future, you just go into NextGen and handle that, and all your billing and transactions still happen for you in NextGen. This is really to speed up those cases where you have those several encounters that need to be created for a single patient event. Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you, and then we can finish the presentation and take Q&A.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. So thank you for going through that and showing the two tools that increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the billing staff, both the billing manager, multiple encounter billing manager, and the Unapplied Deposit Manager software. So a little bit about who iTentive is. I'll just take two minutes to talk about who iTentive is for those of you who don't know who we are. We were founded in 2003, and we have 20 years of experience with NextGen. We have 40-some employees in the company, most of which are consultants that travel from practice to practice, health center to health center, working with the organizations to get as much value out of NextGen as possible. We work with, if you take the 20 years and the 2003, they do not add up, and the reason for that is iTentive started out as the IT department for a medical organization. And back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the business mantra back then was focus on what you do best and outsource the rest, the medical organization was going to outsource the IT group. Leaders of the IT group said, well, if you want to do that, what we'd like to do is form our own company and provide services back to you. So they agreed to do that, and from that point forward, we have worked with over 350 to 400 clients that use NextGen. And during this time frame, we have become a strategic partner with NextGen as well. We generate our revenue through basically 5 revenue streams. We have our consulting group that works, like I mentioned, that works with you to improve workflows, improve business process, improve revenue cycle management. We also can do compliance consulting as well. We have a group of technology folks that can work with you on optimizing NextGen and optimizing your IT infrastructure. We have a group of developers that can develop customized templates and customized reports. We have a group of developers in Joe's group that develop our productivity tools, just like the two you just saw, the Unapplied Deposit Manager and the Multiple Encounter Billing Manager. But we also have our Refund Manager product. We have our ChartGuard suite of products, which is business continuity and disaster downtime preparedness products, as well as derivatives of those called ChartGuard On Demand and ChartGuard Archiver. We have a group of technology folks that can provide IT managed services, meaning that we can support your desktops, your laptops, your printers, your local area networks. We also have our own data center, so we can do complete hosting out of our data center as well. We can provide, like I mentioned, help desk support, both for the IT side, the NextGen side, and then we are an authorized reseller for NextGen as well. So we can provide any one of these services as a point solution or in combination with one another and provide an integrated solution for you as well. So that's a little bit about who we are and what we do. As far as next steps are concerned, if you have any questions about what you saw or heard during the webinar, don't hesitate to contact myself or Joe. via email or give us a call. If you would like to have a more in-depth discussion about one of the products and how it would work within your environment specifically, and how it would be deployed within your environment, and this way you could have an opportunity to ask questions as it specifically pertains to your organization and to your current processes as well. And with that, we'll turn it over for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Tom, and Joe, thank you for the demo. Again, if you have questions, you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel. We only have a couple, so we're happy to answer any that you might have. Just type them in and we'll go through them in the order that we received them. So the first question, are you able to integrate with NextGen Office? Joe?
Unfortunately, at this time, these products are focused on the enterprise NextGen products, enterprise practice management and EHR. Currently, it does not interface with NextGen Office, though, stay in touch because it may be an option sometime in the future. But right now, it's focused on the enterprise EHR and practice management.
Thank you, Joe. Next question, how often are these products updated?
We keep the products in sync with NextGen. We've been doing that for about 15 years now since we started creating NextGen add-on products. We review each new release of NextGen and see if there's anything that we need to change or any new features we can take advantage of. If it's something that needs to change to remain compatible, we go ahead and make those changes in our products right away. And then anything that's a feature release, we do at some point in the future. We do continuous development cycles, so we're always looking at new changes in NextGen, new integrations that we can do, new features. In fact, most of the things you see in our products are items that were suggested by clients using in the real world.
Great, thank you. How long does it take to train on the multiple encounter mode?
The multiple encounter billing manager should be a relatively quick training. We'll spend either 60, 90, 120 minutes with you, depending on what exactly you need. The tool is very straightforward, as you saw on the screen here. It's really just, recognizing that the fields we're seeing here in this single form are the same fields that you see on the encounters themselves and the charges themselves. So we'll sit down with you as part of the end of the install process and walk through creating encounters and charges and make sure that everyone understands how it works and what it does.
Okay, great. Looks like this might be our last question. Will you make the recording available? I have a teammate who was unable to attend, and this would be helpful. Yes, absolutely. We did record it. I'll be sending out an email to everybody who registered for the webinar within the next few days here with a link to the recording and the slides. And if you feel like somebody might be interested in seeing this and be interested in a one-on-one demo as well, I'm sure that you can reach out to Tom and he'd be happy to assist with that. And otherwise, any way that you can get a hold of us, whether it's replying back to my email with a recording or reaching out to Tom or Joe with their information up on the screen, any way that you can get a hold of us, if you have questions or want to see something again, just reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We're happy to help. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And again, let us know, later on if you have more questions.
Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time today.